Hello and welcome to Sansad TV. I'm Frank Rausan Pereira. Well, the Union Budget 2025-26 has introduced transformative reforms across multiple sectors with a primary focus on driving economic growth, enhancing productivity and fostering sustainability across the board. Now, these initiatives are expected to significantly impact the economy. By providing sector-specific support, the government aims to address long-term challenges and create a favourable environment. The budget also lays emphasis on manufacturing, Make in India and exports. This is what we are going to focus on today. Joining me on the program today are Rajiv, Nath, Forum Coordinator IMED and MD Hindustan Syringes. Also with us is Dr. Ajai Sahai, Director General Federation of Indian Export Organizations, and Easwaran Subramanian, Supply Chain and Manufacturing Leader, Deloitte, India. Thank you to my guests for joining me on this special broadcast. All right, Mr. Rajiv, Nath, let me start the program with you first. Let's look at the significant takeaways really as far as the budget is concerned. Let's focus on the external economy. Let's focus on Make in India as well.
So definitely I would say the broad sentiments or the mood given to the macroeconomics are definitely very positive. The mission for manufacturing definitely is a very good initiative. Make in India was a headline. We've been wanting to see how it's going to be unfolding. So hopefully now things will start unfolding in the right direction. The idea about having light regulations and more decriminalization are definitely very welcome. So those are, I would say, definitely things on the positive side. Where we would have liked to see more substance would also have been that in medical device specific, last year the policy was introduced for National Medical Device Policy 2023, in which one of the key strategies was to encourage investments in manufacturing of medical devices, because this year the imports are expected to cross 75,000 crore rupees. And we are 70% import dependent. So to stall that import dependence and to make it other way around, I would say more exports than imports, which we've already done in disposable consumables. We also need to do that in electronics and the equipment side or in the IVD side. What was required was to give an impetus to manufacturing. And that will only come forward if investments will take place and they'll be protected. So if you've got mobile phones which were at 20% custom duty, having their protection to put the industry over here, with 0% or 5% or 7.5% custom duty on medical devices, it becomes challenging to put up a factory and to compete with imports. So many manufacturers who had become traders 10-15 years back, we've been seeking that they should come back to manufacturing. And for this, some level of protection is definitely required so that they don't become pseudo manufacturers but real actual manufacturers.
Absolutely. All right. Let me take the points that you're making forward as well with the other panelists. Let me bring in Mr. Subramanian here into the picture. As far as manufacturing is concerned, what would you like to highlight? What do you think is the main takeaway really from the budget with regards to manufacturing as well as everything that is allied with manufacturing?
Okay. Two things in my perspective. First one is, I think, the national manufacturing mission, right? I think the way I expect it to contribute substantially is by really reducing the variability of ease of doing business and the cost of doing business across states. As we implement a framework together with the policy and the governance and the execution roadmap, I think we should really be able to reduce the variability of the ease and cost of doing business across states. So what that would mean is that we would be able to achieve what we set out in the national manufacturing policy in terms of really having a dispersed manufacturing footprint all across India, which would also be a big case for inclusive development. So that, I think, is the first point that is, I think, relevant, and that is also important in the medium term, because as we start looking at the manufacturing contribution of GDP from 16 to 25%, without a diversified manufacturing footprint all over India, because now it is clustered in a few states, I think that is going to be very, very significant. So that's point number one. The second, I think, is also sticking on to the national manufacturing mission. I think the focus on clean tech manufacturing. I think with aspects like the carbon border adjustment mechanism and the other dimensions of sustainability coming in as a cost to manufacturing, I think a shift towards clean tech and the focus on clean tech will become very, very relevant. I think we are focused on clean energy, we are focused on electric mobility. I think what that would also drive is create ecosystems for clean tech manufacturing portfolios and therefore make us relevant to the global value chain participation, which possibly may not be the case if you're not focusing on them, because those countries as markets would have moved to a different portfolio per se. So that I think making the export portfolio from the current 2% of global trade to our aspiration of going beyond 5%, I think this will be a very important dimension. So I see these two as big long-term initiatives that we are taking. The third and the most important thing that I see is the focus on labor-intensive sectors. We had announcements for leather and footwear. We had an announcement which is also around toys. And what all of these would do is that all of them, and also food processing, all these three together, in our estimate, would have an ability to add another about 1.5 million to the manufacturing employment ratio. So to that extent, I think these three, in terms of participation in global trade, really looking at the inclusive growth and development of India from manufacturing, and the third one really looking at long-term employment. These three, I think, are the big takeaways that I see, obviously outside a few other things which we can speak later.
Absolutely. We'll talk about all those aspects as well, but let me bring in Dr. Ajai Sahai into the picture now to get a perspective from him too. Dr. Sahai, as far as the budget is concerned, let's focus on exports, because, the budget also has called exports a driver of growth. There has been a significant impetus really for the export sector as well. Your takeaways, your thoughts?
In fact, FM has rightly said that export is the fourth engine of growth for the country, because Indian exports, though we are not an export-centric economy, is playing transformational role in Indian economy. And we are very happy that government has thought about export mission or promotion mission also, where they will be looking into the sectorals, they will be looking into the ministerial also, particularly focusing on three areas. One is the flow of credit, because we have seen that there is widening of gulf between the demand of credit for the export sector and its supply. In fact, in 2022, the total export credit net outstanding was 2,27,000 crore, which came down to 2,15,000 crore in 2024, a drop of 5%. Though during the same period, Indian export in rupee term grew by 15%. Export are under the priority sector lending, but even in the priority sector lending, the export credit is declining on year basis. So it's very good that we will have a foreign promotion mission looking into this aspect. The second is government is looking into the new instrument of financing, and from that perspective, they are looking into making the factoring little attractive, because factoring globally is much used by the export sector, but in India, the cost of factoring is so much that generally Indian exporter, they get the factoring from outside India. The third is very important, is with regard to supporting exporter against the non-tariff measures. In fact, we looked into that aspect very closely. After COVID, we are seeing increasing protectionism. The world has adopted around 24,000 measures which have affected the flow of trade as well as investment, and even in last 1 year, we have seen around 169 trade restrictive measures which impacted trade to the extent of around close to $900 billion. Secondly, now government is also talking about a business trade network, which will be extremely beneficial as we are moving away from the paperless trade to a digital trade, connecting all the interested stakeholders, whether it's the DGFT, custom, GST, and banks, exporters, all will be integrated at a single platform. And the challenges which is being faced by the export sector with regard to the flow of data and mismatch of data to a large extent will be addressed. For export sector, government has decided that India needs to integrate into the global value chain, as we are not significant part except to some extent in gem and jewelry, pharma and automobile sector. Government will be identifying the domestic sector and strengthening those sectors, so we integrate into global value chain. Besides that, for sector-specific measures have been taken, as talked about by previous speaker, in respect of leather, marine sector, toys, handicraft, and all these will definitely push the employment intensive sector. In fact, our trade policy should have a mix of supporting both the sunrise sector's export, which are important when we are looking to take India's export to $2 trillion, but at the same time also facilitating labor-intensive sectors as they are crucial for creating jobs into the country.
Absolutely. All right. Let me take the discussion forward now and bring in another aspect as well. Mr. Nath, let me bring you into the picture once again. You know, we've heard so much about trade and tariffs and so on and so forth, you know, ever since President Donald Trump has taken over the helm. What kind of an impact are external factors going to have on the Indian economy?
Well, I think this is in every problem, there's a blessing in disguise. And over here, I think there's going to be an opportunity for India, because the most common word I've been hearing for the last 1 year internationally has been supply chain diversification post-COVID. China has pretty much been dominating the manufacturing zone and the supply chains for various products, including medical devices, to even countries, whether it is USA, Europe, or even in India, as the dominant exporters. And here everybody is now looking at India as an alternative over here. We've got a lot of good credibility in certain product lines and in as fair business practices goes over there. Also in terms of quality certification and accreditation. The tariff barriers will not be of much concern, I would say, for India, because what they'll be having for China and other countries will always be higher than for India as far as medical devices goes. But yes, the challenge that we do face from medical devices, both for Europe and for USA, is the very high non-tariff barriers in terms of technical regulations. Getting a US FDA certification or approval or a C certification has become now extremely expensive. What used to cost a few $1,000s now costs lakhs of dollars and crores of rupees for each product line. So one has to choose where can one really succeed and only offer that product line to that market over there. The rest of the products you may have in your basket, but then you will refrain from offering everything to those countries over there. So that is an area of definitely, I would say, which is holding back our full potential over there.
All right. So how do we realize this full potential is something that I'd like to take forward with Mr. Subramanian now. Mr. Subramanian, as far as these external factors are concerned, as far as, you know, what Mr. Nath has just pointed out, what's the way forward?
I think, two things that I think we should keep in perspective, like what he said. One is obviously it could be a sweet spot journey for India, as we take this forward. But first and most important is, I think, for India to take full advantage of what's happening globally and possibly tilted towards us, I think manufacturing has to really enhance its factor productivity. I think if you look at the total factor productivity growth for India over the last decades, we have really been roughly at about half of that of China, which essentially means that our productivity growths have been, closer to 1.6%, whereas China has always been in the 3.5% plus range. So I think tariffs or otherwise to other countries, I think for India to take advantage of what's happening globally, most important is factor productivity and how do we really accelerate that. The second one would be a focus sector, focus market approach. I think what this would also mean is, to the point that he mentioned about strategic sourcing in the context of supply chain resilience, the most preferred destination should be India from a sourcing perspective. What it would essentially mean for us is that we may need to have economies of scale and scope in specific sectors which can make us globally competitive. So I think in many ways, I think the champion sectors that we had outlined a decade back, as well as I think an acceleration of our factor productivity would be the two big things. The biggest advantage that we have in both of this is that we have a great domestic market which is growing, and we are this year too going to be the fastest growing large economy. So to that extent, I think we will have the platform in place for us from an India perspective, which provides a great underwritten commitment from the marketplace to our company. So I think they should take advantage of that.
Absolutely. All right. Let me take this particular aspect forward with Dr. Sahai. What is the advantage really as far as India is concerned? How do we also ensure that we see the full potential of the advantages that we have?
In fact, as told by the previous panelist, India has the advantage because tariff on India will be definitely less than the tariff which may be imposed on many of our partner country. I am also apprehensive whether he will be imposing any tariff on India. Probably that may be used as a kind of tool for negotiation with India to get better market access for the US product. But at the same time, I think it's very important that we also realize that we need to develop capabilities and competitive manufacturing into a country like India. India has not gained into the tariff war on the last occasion because probably in many of the segments where the doors were open, we were not manufacturing and were not competitive. Major business has gone to Vietnam. The situation is little different today. Vietnam has extremely low unemployment rate, and we feel that once China is targeted on technology front, many of the technology companies will move to Vietnam, and therefore India has huge opportunity. But for that, I think we have to look into making our manufacturing robust, making it competitive also, addressing all factors of production and looking into the logistics, looking into the entire supply chain. And I think it will require a whole of government approach to support that. Opportunity is definitely knocking at our door, but probably it will take little time before we actually encash on that.
Absolutely. All right. Time to take the discussion forward now. Let me bring you to the picture once again, Mr. Nath. Mr. Nath, another aspect that we've been speaking about is, of course, our demographic dividend and how we can really make that shine. And, we've been focusing on skilling as far as this budget is concerned. How much of an impact is it going to have, say, on industry and others when you have the skilled workforce that is required?
Well, here again, I would say the budget has given a clear direction over here. And as far as medical devices goes specifically, again, the macroeconomic numbers are quite encouraging. So the government came out with a scheme in November for skilling of workforce as well as for technicians in terms of medical device manufacturing. And the allocation for the various schemes numbers have gone up from 3,200 crore rupees to 5,200 crore rupees. So that's a huge jump, and the disbursement still, of course, has to come forward. It's only at the sanction stage. But we do expect that this will come forward, and whether the IITs or the NIPERs or the other parts go, the Life Science Skill Development Council of India is jointly working with the Department of Pharmaceuticals on this strategic mission over here. A few years back, IMED and QCI had created the Indian Biomedical Skill Council, and this was again to make sure that we've got skilled technicians who can service the machinery which is made in India, or maintain it, or make sure that the warranties and the life cycle of the machines get extended properly. Absolutely.
All right. Mr. Subramanian, let me bring you into the picture here as well. We are also looking at a time when AI is at the forefront. Everyone seems to be focusing on AI at this point in time. Just before the budget, we saw, the Chinese unveil DeepSeek as well. It seems to have created a big flutter as far as the global community is concerned. So from that perspective, how important is it to skill our workforce and also have skilling programs and centers for skilling to ensure that we are world leaders?
I think the budget quite naturally has recognized this, right? And if you look at the budget, we had three things. I think what was just now spoken, the 5 national centers for skilling, the Center for Excellence in AI, and 50,000 of Atal Tinkering Lab, right? Which are very, very critical because that fundamentally develops grassroots innovation and thinking. So I think from an overall budget perspective and a government priority perspective across the multiple schemes, I think skilling is recognized. Now, if you really look at the impact that it can create, see, I spoke about factor productivity and the implication for us to really drive a large-scale employment enabled by manufacturing, especially in the secondary sector. I think if you really look at it, this provides a big opportunity for us to leapfrog on productivity, quality, and excellence. So frankly, I would say that AI can be a big enabler for India, given the fact that a lot of the activities that are there, especially on the end-to-end value chain of manufacturing, where we have sort of had aspects of productivity and quality dimensions impacting India for global participation. I think that can be completely plugged in the short term. So I think there is a very real and near impact that AI can create on the manufacturing side. The second is, I think you would have also seen about the focus on global capability centers. And as you would be aware, literally every global capability center of a Fortune 500 or a Fortune 1000 is in India. And there I would assume that there will be huge activities with regard to. So the second reason why skilling in AI and the related aspects of technology become relevant is also because it is not just about the core sectors, but it is also about global capability centers where India will actually control a lot of what can happen in the rest of the world for their competitiveness. So without India in perspective and the AI in context, I think the global companies would have a hard time defending their competitiveness. So I think India has two reasons to gain. One is from a overall value addition in India perspective, and second is India for global.
Absolutely. And, Dr. Sahai, coming back to you now, as far as exports are concerned, what's there? Because if you look at exports as a chunk and as a basket, seems like services also are a major part of exports today, and they seem to be beating goods at some level. So from that perspective, how do you look at this?
No, in fact, you have rightly said exports are picking up very sharply. And in fact, if you look into the data of first 9 months, the merchandise trade touched to $322 billion, while services, they climbed to $281 billion. And the way the services are clocking a double-digit growth, we are pretty sure that by 2030, they may surpass services. But while it's a good thing for a country like India, but at the same time, it definitely puts a lot of challenges, because India requires a lot of blue-collar jobs, not so much white-collar jobs, which can be provided by the manufacturing sector. So we are very happy that services sectors are doing well, but in the services sector, probably we have to look into other than IT-enabled services and business services to expand it to other sectors of services also, and not too much dependent on advanced economies as our market. The market diversification needs to take place there also. But from employment perspective, again, I will say that we have to bring back our focus on employment intensive sectors. Over a period of time, we have lost our share in the global market, be it apparel, be it gems and jewelry, be it footwear sector. In all these segments, we have lost the share. Only in two sectors, which are handicraft or rather furniture and toys, we have gained the share. So our focus has to come on employment intensive sectors for export, for creation of the jobs. So far as the sunrise sectors are doing, we are doing extremely well in exports, and whether it's machinery, it's automobile, or it's a telecommunication and mobile segment, we are constantly gaining share. And mobile sector has been a revelation where probably by 2026, we may be touching an export of $100 billion.
Absolutely. All right, gentlemen, it's time to get quick closing comments now from all of you with the best way forward. Let me start first with you, Mr. Nath.
Well, I would say the best way forward, of course, is incentivizing manufacturing. If imports and trading is going to be more convenient, why will people go into manufacturing? So that is, I think, the most important thing. We've got more than 33 regulatory approvals that we need to take before we put a factory. The kind of costs, official and unofficial, which go along into pushing that across are adding to the cost of doing business and the delays over there. We've been promised and we've been assured that this will be improved. And a lot of interest has been taken by the DPITT and their officers in understanding the cost of doing business and what is really required by manufacturing. But we still have to see that translated into real action at the state levels. Both central government and state governments need to really work on incentivizing manufacturing so that traders become manufacturers.
Absolutely. Mr. Subramanian, your closing comments on the program.
I think we need to captivate the value chain for anything that we do rather than focusing on one end of value addition. So I think if we take clean tech manufacturing and we spoke about electric mobility, we spoke about renewable, I think in electric mobility, we need to focus on the entire value chain and the captivity being in India so that, one, supply chain resilience, two, economies of scale and scope, and third, global competitiveness. So that I think, and like what he said, if there are incentivizations to be done, ecosystems to be created, friendliness index to help ease cost and speed of doing business to be measured, I think those are dimensions which will enable that.
Absolutely. And Dr. Sahai, please close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
I will say that exports need to be supported and facilitated because rupee is nowhere it's near real value. We have very high cost of credit. We have a high logistics cost. And the inherent disabilities of manufacturing cannot be taken forward when you are competitive in the global market.
Absolutely. All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this special telecast. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Well, that's it from me. See you again next time.